About 3 days ago, I was contacted by a lady from America asking me if I'd be prepared to do a ghost story for Thanksgiving, which is today, the 4th Thursday in November. And I thought, what a very good idea. So I had to think, obviously I could do with something that obviously is to do with England, Britain, but also America. So I have I think it's a very interesting ghost story. And it starts actually in 1665 here in Derby. And we have what's known as the Shire Hall, which is where all the trials took place. Most of the famous murder trials for the best part of 300 years took place in Derby's Shire Hall. But it was also the scene of the last pressing to death of a female in Great Britain. Pressing to death. What does that mean? Right. In those days, you weren't allowed the right to silence. You had to plead guilty or not guilty. No such thing as remaining mute. Today, if you keep quiet, it's considered a plea of not guilty. But in those days, it was very different because, are you guilty or not guilty? I'm not guilty. And then they found you guilty. Your land, your property, your money went to the Crown. This was mainly men, by the way, of course, because it was men mainly in those days that held the purse strings, for want of a better word. So, you weren't allowed to keep quiet. Are you guilty or not guilty? I'm guilty. Oh, well, not a problem then. You're found guilty, you've pleaded it, your land goes to the Crown. Are you guilty or not guilty? If you remained mute, even if you were found guilty, your land did not go to the Crown. Your land went back to your family. Your goods, your home, your money went to your family. So some people who probably knew they were going to be found guilty anyway would remain mute. Now, the Crown, the government wanted your money and they needed to make you plead. So a special sentence was passed on those who remained mute. And that sentence was that you be taken back from this courtroom to a dungeon beneath this building, a room where no light can enter. There you will be laid naked on the floor with a cloth around your loins and weights of iron or stone as heavy as you can bear and heavier to be placed upon your body. On the first day, you will be fed 3 coarse morsels of bread. On the second day, 3 draughts of water from the stagnant pool nearest the prison door, and alternate days of bread or water until you plead or you die. This was done in Derby in 1665 to a female, deaf, mute. She'd been brought to the courts for stealing a pair of gloves. She couldn't talk. She couldn't hear what they were saying to her in the court. And they sentenced her to this dreadful, dreadful sentence. What they did was spread-eagled you on the floor, tied you to the floor, and placed a large door or board on top of you, and weights of iron or weights of stone as heavy as you can bear and heavier. Each day they would come forward and say, are you guilty or not guilty? If you remained quiet, mute, they piled more rocks, more stones, or more weights. This poor girl managed to last for 2 days. She was still alive. So they undid her, stood her up, placed a large sharp stone on the ground and placed the door and the weights back on top of her, which punctured her lungs, and she died in agony. Her ghost, of course, still haunts to this day in Derby's Guildhall. And to this very day, I must, because obviously a lot of you guys know I do ghost walks around the city. And of course, I frequently end up at the building where the pressing took place, which is the Shire Hall. I've spoken to 2 security guys that have delivered prisoners. They've both said that they've actually been told by guys that have been brought into court, been put down in the cells under the building, have seen this woman, youngish woman, very scruffy, quite dirty, walking from one cell through the wall into another cell. She looks confused, as I'm sure she would have been. I did a ghost walk about 5 years ago for magistrates, and we ended up at the Shire Hall, and they took me in. They let me go round and showed me various places, and we went down into where the cells used to be. Unfortunately, the whole place has been modernised, and the original dungeons are not there. But one of the magistrates told me that he had seen a woman, not down in the cells, but in the corridors, coming away from where the grand jury room was. A woman in her late teens, very scruffy, and wandered and looked again as if she was totally confused and didn't know where she was. He said that he actually said to her, "Can I help you, my love? Are you looking for somewhere?" And apparently she just faded away in front of him. I presume it is the girl that was pressed to death, but it was the last pressing to death to take place in Great Britain of a female. The last pressing to death of a male took place in Nottingham in the 1700s, but another female was also pressed to death in the Shambles in York, a lady called Margaret Clitheroe. She was harbouring Roman Catholic priests, and she would not tell them the hiding places where they were being hidden. And so she was pressed to death in York. Her ghost is still seen wandering down the Shambles in York. She was a butcher, and she had a butcher's shop, and that's why they were called the Shambles. That's where the butcher's shops were in towns in those days. They were called the Shambles. Margaret Clitheroe's ghost has been seen there, but even to this day, would you believe, she was beatified as a saint. And just down the road in York, there is a nunnery still there, and they have preserved in a glass case Margaret Clitheroe's mummified hand. Her ghost has also been seen in that nunnery, always around the glass case where her hand is. Whether she wants it back, I don't know. But moving over the pond to Salem, 1692, 19 people hanged for witchcraft, and 1 man pressed to death. Giles Corey, an 81-year-old wealthy farmer, the scourge of Salem. Allegedly, he had murdered someone in the 1670s and managed to bribe his way out of the courts. He was not a particularly, what's the word I'm looking for, well-liked man in Salem, to say the least. And when the witch trials took place, would you believe he actually testified in court against his wife, Martha? He was then accused of witchcraft himself. He refused to plead in court, and his sentence was that you be taken from this courtroom. I don't know whether they had a deep dungeon, not in Salem in 1692. Legend has it that he was actually taken to a field and a door placed on top of him and rocks placed on top of his body. And they say that he lasted for 2 days. And the sheriff of Essex County, George Corbin, who was responsible for the execution of all those 20 people, including Corey, asked him both days whether he was guilty or not guilty. On the second day, apparently, he was being so pressed that his tongue started to come out of his mouth, and Corbyn used his walking stick to push Corey's tongue back into his mouth. And he died cursing the town of Salem and the sheriff. And the sheriff died at the age of 30 of a heart attack. And other sheriffs have also had serious heart problems. I am told that some have actually died of heart attacks. And it went on until, I think, 1991, when the sheriff's office moved from Salem. And they believe that the curse of Salem has now been lifted. But Giles Corey's ghost, a harbinger of death, has often been seen near the graveyard where he was buried in Howard Street. And apparently it's usually seen when there's a pending doom taking place. And it was last seen apparently in 1914 when the Great Fire of Salem took place. So he is, for want of a better word, as I've already said, harbinger of death. So I suggest if you're walking past Howard Street Cemetery in dead of night, I think it's quite a good idea if you keep your eyes closed, because apparently these harbingers of death foretell of not only tragedies, but death to you. If you see a harbinger of death, a black dog with red staring eyes and pointy ears the size of a donkey, that's another harbinger of death, just as banshees are. Keep your eyes closed just in case. So I hope you've enjoyed my little account of pressing to death and all three ghosts that have arisen after that horrendous form. It wasn't intended as a form of execution. It was intended as a form of torture to make you plead so that your money would go to the Crown. And this is where the phrase, "I won't press you for an answer," comes from. Do sleep well, guys. Don't have nightmares.